Please make sure you congratulate them. And now we're down to our final honoree. This person began working at SU in 1986 and is celebrating 30 years of service. David Rubin is going to come down to speak on behalf of Susan Nash. Yeah. She was David's executive assistant for many years, and then I had the pleasure of inheriting her for the last 8 years, and I tell you, Susan has been an amazing job. She's done so much great work here. The building that we're standing in, she practically helped build with her own two little hands. Could not have gotten through the Newhouse 2 renovation without her help, and on and on and on, but I'm going to let David speak on her behalf. David, thank you.
Well, thanks to your strict adherence to the 2-minute rule, you've given me minus 17 minutes to talk about Susan.
No, we're scheduled till 6 o'clock.
Oh, we are?
Yeah.
So you knew that they would all ignore you.
Yes, she did.
Right.
This is not her first rodeo.
All right. Well, I will try to stick closer to the rule. This is really a tale of 4 different Susan Nashes. She is that multi-talented that I don't think a single discussion of one Susan Nash would do it. The first is Susan, the writer. When I arrived here in 1990, this was a very sleepy place. In fact, I think it was the first day or two, you said to me that the biggest event each day was waiting for the mail to arrive.
It's true.
And that once it had been distributed, there was nothing left to do. So clearly this place has come a ways since 1990. Back then, I had to answer, I got mail, I mean real mail, and I had to answer it with mail, which meant I had to write it. But I didn't have time to do all this writing myself. Susan worked for me, and I said, well, what do you think? Can you write for me these letters and figure out what my voice is and do it? And she took it on. I have to say she was amazing. She very quickly adopted my somewhat spare, acerbic style, and she was not afraid to drop bombshells if necessary. And I worked with her on the niceties of grammar, spelling, syntax, punctuation, which she didn't need much help on, but I think I whipped you into a really good writer. And by the time I unfortunately had to deal with email, which meant I had to do my own writing, this was supposed to be efficient, not efficient, I didn't need her to do that anymore, but I could tell just from that experience how fast a learner she was, how talented she was, how smart she was. This brings us to the second Susan, which is Susan the architect. The 2 buildings that I found here in 1990 were not being utilized very well, and they certainly didn't have the spaces that we needed to create in order to start our first development operation and our first career center and so on. And so I set Susan to the task of trying to figure out how to reorganize those 2 buildings and what we could turn spaces into, where we could do some construction that might work and so on. She has the ability to think in 3D. She can think spatially. When I walk into a room, I can only remember what that room looked like when I'm in it. If it has changed, I only know what it looks like now that it's changed. I can't remember what it used to look like, even if it was yesterday. But Susan has the ability to imagine what spaces could look like if you wanted to do these various things. I failed mechanical drawing. My assumption is that you aced it, or you maybe never even had to take it. And so she was able, through her own architectural skills, to make the best uses of Newhouse 1 and 2 and was our liaison to all the various construction people who came over to do the work and generally tried to cheat us, and she would make sure that they didn't. When it was clear we were going to need Newhouse 3, this was something I swore I would never get involved in, because I didn't want to build a building as dean. I know they can eat you up, and I know I'm terrible at it for the reasons that I've just said to you, but I knew I had her. And I also knew that she would love to do this, and that she would do it well. And so she was my security blanket when I said we can do this. So we set up the Space Cadets. Some of you in here might have been on that group in order to analyze what it is we needed in this new building. And Susan was either on it or was my representative on it, I can't remember. But she was at the center of the process, including hiring the architecture firm, then called Polshek, to come in. And I remember distinctly early in the process, they had a particular design problem. They couldn't quite figure out how they were going to do something we wanted in the building. And Susan had the blueprints for the 2 existing buildings and what they were planning to do, and she had a supply of tracing paper. And she would bring out this tracing paper, and she would figure out how you could do what they couldn't figure out how to do. This is not a joke. And she went to them, and our lead architect, Tomas Rossant, some of you may remember him, a fabulous guy, and she said, Tomas, look at these tracings. And I think he was just blown away. And she was right. And they have done a lot of work with universities. They had never met someone like this. They said they had never worked with somebody who represented the eggheads on the academic side, who actually not only understood what they were trying to do and didn't get in the way of what they were trying to do and didn't constantly change work orders, but actually helped them solve their design problems. And as a result of this, to this day, Susan is close to Tomas and sees him. And he has said that working with her on Newhouse 3 was the greatest professional experience of his life. And that's because of her. And as a result, this building came in on budget, it came in on time, and nobody was killing anybody at the end of it. And Susan went to every meeting of the contractors and our building supervisor to look out for our interests, and they came to respect her just as much as the architects did, and she knows every board and nail in this building. And I said to her, you know, when you're long gone from here, you have two great sons, but you have a 3rd child. And you gave birth to this building. So you should take credit for it. And I'll tell you, if I hadn't had her, I couldn't have done this. I wouldn't even have tried to do this. 3rd is Susan, the logician. You could have had a career in the United States military. We could use you figuring out how to get supplies into Syria, for example. She can stage events. She understands logically. We have to do this before we can do this, before we can do this. She thinks a dozen steps out. And every time we remodel things around here and people are going to have to move, it's her responsibility to figure out, all right, then where are you going to go, where are you going to go, and so on. Doing Newhouse 3 along with the bridge and putting in the food.com required lots of movement all over the place. And it was Susan constantly figuring out how to stage all this. And this is a real art. As you may remember, we ended up in a trailer out on the plaza at one point, which was actually a great place for the dean to be because nobody bothered me. In fact, I recommend this to you. Just go out on a trailer, particularly in the winter. You won't see anybody. But we figured out this was necessary. It was the only way if for me to get out of the old dean's office, which is now the admissions office, where Terry is, I had to get out of there. And so she figured all this out as to how it was going to work. And that's Susan, the logician. And last is Susan, the mother. And a lot of you in this room won't know this because you weren't here. But Susan has 2 sons, and one of them, when he was very young, was very ill with cancer. And he went through radiation, and he also, at one point, was going to need a transplant to survive. And there were many days when I just didn't think, and I don't think she thought that he was going to make it, particularly waiting for this transplant. He was a really sick kid. Throughout all of this, including taking him to the hospital in Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh, Susan soldiered on. She did the job here. She got done what had to get done. And I marveled at her ability to watch her son basically sunsetting in front of her eyes and continue being as professional as she was. And I never asked her directly how she did this, but I know how she did this, and that is she is a woman of very strong faith. And the reason that it's hard for me to really appreciate that is that I am not. But I don't know that you'll ever make me a religious person, but you certainly convinced me that something is going on. And we saved him. And Sawyer is now 16 and healthy. Yeah. And I don't think if Susan hadn't been a woman of such faith, with such strong prayers, and many of you in this room were praying along with her, I don't know that he would have made it. So you turned me into a believer, sort of. Okay. And you're the only person in the world who could possibly have done that. So I want to add to this Susan, the spiritual leader and inspiration, as a 5th identity. So Susan Nash, writer, architect, logician, mother, spiritual leader, all true. I've said before, and I'm just about done, I've said before up here that the strength of this school is its faculty and its staff. And the staff are really crucial. There is no staff member who has contributed more to the overall health of this institution in the last 30 years, which means, in my view, ever, than Susan Nash. And there are many of you in here who don't really know her. You'll have to take it on faith when I say to you that without her, many things about the way this school runs today would not be happening. You owe a lot of how great a place this is to work to her. And I hope that you can give this school another 20 years.
I said that the honorees didn't have to say anything. So thank you all for coming at 6 o'clock, but there's a little bit more food, so please eat the food, and I'm so appreciative of being able to celebrate together, the family, and so please tell your friends so they come next year to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, David. We'll have to bring you back from Charleston to do the awards. Congratulations, Susan, and congratulations to all of our honorees. Can we have a round of applause for everyone? Grab something to eat, have a last beer or glass of wine on us. Thank you all for coming.